For those that don't know, this is Astrid. She is our new Clean Health Accredited Clinical Dietitian. So that's super exciting news to have her join the team. So I wanted her to jump on today just to talk a little bit about herself and answer a few questions that we got on nutrition. Tell us a little bit more about your background in the industry.
So basically, I am originally from Venezuela. I did my bachelor's degree for 6 years. Quite a few years ago, probably about 8 years ago. Then I did a little bit of working with clients and workshops in nutrition and education for general population. And then moved to Australia, did a master's degree here for 2.5 years. And since I finished my master's degree, I've been working as a clinical dietitian in a rehab private hospital here on the Gold Coast, and a little bit of a private coaching as well online with clients. And that's pretty much what I've done in the past 8.5, 10 years. So that's me. And I also have a little bit of a background in personal training and obviously everything in regards to fitness.
Amazing. Well, let's jump into the questions. A lot of you have asked many questions, all general about nutrition. So let's jump straight in. Our first one here is, can you out-exercise a bad diet?
Well, the first answer would be no. You probably can't do that, just because when you talk about a bad diet, you're talking about eating unhealthy foods in general, or eating a lot of not very nutritious foods. And it depends on your goals though, because if we think about your goals being performance, there has been actually quite a bit of research and like even looking at clients and seeing anecdotal evidence that a lot of people can, even eating a poor diet, can exercise pretty well in terms of performance. Like when you look at ultramarathon runners or people that are working out for a long period of time, many hours, they actually don't have a pretty healthy diet. They actually need a lot of calories and a lot of different foods to actually fit in the calories they burn. So if in terms of performance, obviously we're not saying it is recommended to eat a lot of different very calorie dense foods or things like that. But you want to think about what your goal is. When it comes to fat loss, you gotta think about that. You want to think about being an 80-20 rule, where 80% of your nutrition can be mostly whole foods, very nutrient dense, and those foods that are the treats or your favorite foods that are not necessarily very nutritious, they can still be part of your healthy diet in a moderation and manner, but not necessarily something that you should be aiming to have all the time. When it comes to look at your overall health, you want to still think about that everything in moderation is allowed and is fine. But when it comes to going to extremes, whether you have to pick a side, it is not healthy going either way. So very, very clean, healthy diet isn't necessarily going to prevent you from catching a disease in the long run anyways. And on the other hand, eating a very poor diet is not necessarily going to reflect on your health long term either.
Amazing. So the next question, Astrid, that we have is, how do you find a client's maintenance calorie?
So that can be in a different, you can use different approaches for doing that. My favorite approach is to look at the client's eating pattern for 2 weeks and make them track consistently for 2 weeks everything they eat without changing anything, and tracking also their weight so they can see whether their weight is changing or not. But if they are eating on what they normally eat for 2 weeks, and they actually are able to maintain at that normal amount they normally eat, that's their maintenance calories. So when we add the tracking, we now have the awareness of how much they actually eating to be at that maintenance. And then from there, we can pretty much add, if we are looking at bulking or a gaining phase, or reduce calories depending on the amount of time we have to make that person lose weight. So usually that would be the approach that I would use. The other thing that you could use, if it's not something that the client wants, because they kind of need to waste 2 weeks of the coaching program in maintenance, you want to perhaps look at using a predictive equation. That there are lots available, but you can use any of those that as preference. You can perhaps use like the Mueller equation or the Cunningham or Harrison-Benedict, and you put some of your data in the equations and you get what it'd be your basal metabolic rate plus adding your estimated physical activity throughout the day. So there would be an activity factor that you would add on top of it, and with that you can pretty much have an idea of how much you could potentially be using as a maintenance calories. But it doesn't mean it is accurate, because obviously it is an estimation. So my favorite, as I said before, is the tracking for 2 weeks your current normally eating and see whether your weight stays the same, goes up or goes down. Obviously you want to get an average of your weight so you have an idea, because it's going to fluctuate day by day. But if you get an average in 2 weeks, you're going to have an idea whether that calories you're eating are pretty much at your maintenance.
Yeah. Awesome. Next question that we received: what are some tips to keep your client compliant on their nutrition program that you've given?
So the coaching program needs to be, first of all, aligned with what their goals are, and the adherence depends a lot on what the weekly goals or the strategies you put in place aligns with the client's preferences, the client's personality, and how much they have on their plate right now. So like if they are potentially able to stick to something they feeling comfortable with, they are able to be consistent with that, and you are able to adjust as quickly as possible if something goes wrong or is something that is not necessarily going well, then you're going to ensure the adherence potentially at as high as possible. But if you don't adjust as quickly as you can, or it is something that you sort of impose to the client rather than negotiating with them, it is probably going to have lower adherence rate.
Definitely. The next question is, when programming nutrition for a client, do you prefer to give them a set meal plan or just set macros?
That answer is going to depend on the client. My favorite way to work with clients is generally to work based on their current diet. So I try too much, especially if we are starting to work together, but rather come up with some strategies or interesting swaps that we could do to make it easy to adhere to, and also don't feel like you're kind of changing completely your diet to something new. I used to, and I learned from university to set meal plans and give that to my patients. And that doesn't necessarily is a bad thing, especially if you have a client that has no idea of what carbohydrate or macros are, or they don't have idea of what tracking is. And if you have a really limited amount of time or interaction with them for any X amount of reasons, then the meal plan can be an initial step that you could use to kind of increase their thoughts, their awareness, kind of a little bit of a knowledge when you think about structuring their meal times, the plan of how to combine different nutrients or different food groups, and that kind of gives them a structure to work on, and based on that they can progress, and you can always adjust as you go with them. The other thing is, if they are already sort of an advanced client, where let's say they've been training and they counted macros before, they know how to track, then is a different approach, then you can just perhaps give them calculate their maintenance calories, calculate what their deficit would be, and then just give them the macros based on the principles of making sure they have a high protein diet, and the carbohydrates and fats, they can just choose them as preference. That's something that you can always work with them as well, if they are more happy to do that at that point or in that way. So it really depends on the client and the basic knowledge, how much knowledge they have and what do they need to go forward. Some people like just to be told what to do, and some others like to be more proactive with their choices, and they have better adherence if they are doing their own things on their own, and you just tell them basic guidelines to base their nutrition on, and then decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the next question. How do you know if you're insulin resistant or insulin sensitive?
Okay, that's a tricky question, and that definitely is a clinical question. If you are insulin resistant, you won't have like physical symptoms that would tell you, oh, you have insulin resistant. You will probably need a clinical test to do that. So perhaps it's your insulin level test, or your blood glucose levels to monitor them, or a blood glucose tolerant test. Or you probably can have a test that is called HbA1c that tells you perhaps how well managed your blood sugar levels are. So it is the only way that you will actually know if you have insulin resistance or not. But basically you can see quite a few symptoms that might give you an idea. If you're insulin resistant, perhaps you're always hungry, you struggle to lose some weight, you're seeing some patches or dark coloring around your neck or under your armpits. Some of those things can give you some signs that you have insulin resistance, but it's not very straightforward. So usually if you are in doubt, it is better just to go of a blood test initially and talk to your GP about it.
Yeah, definitely. Next question we received is, what is your personal opinion on aggressive cardio?
Well, it really depends on the length of it and what the goal is. If the length is going to be pretty short and sharp, probably can be a good idea for certain people. You don't want to impose this sort of aggressive cuts in someone who has a disordered eating or unhealthy relationship with food. But if they are pretty focused on what they have to do, you have a very good strategy out, then you can definitely work on something that can be aggressive, but it has to be for a short period of time. Like it would go over 2 to 3 weeks. Over that amount of time, that would be a very long deficit. If it's a very steep deficit, and that probably is not going to result very good, especially mentally. Physiologically, up until 3 weeks, you're able to kind of get away with a deep deficit, but you then need to really have a strategy to get in, get out, and focus on something a little bit more sustainable. So maybe something that you can definitely see that you're able to maintain for a longer period of time, and definitely would think about including refeeds or diet breaks in between, just to make it even more sustainable and much more manageable.
Aesthetics, let's answer quickly on the topic of insulin. How to improve insulin resistance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The way you can improve insulin resistance if you're already been diagnosed with insulin resistance is, first of all, you gotta be more active. You have to be a little bit more active throughout the day. You really need to include resistance training as well in your lifestyle. At least 3 times a week, I would be aiming for a resistance training. And in diet-wise, you really want to focus on a high nutrient-dense diet that's based on fruit and vegetables, and be really aware of how much carbohydrates in quantities you're having per meal. So you want to distribute, have an even distribution of carbohydrates throughout the day. You want to perhaps think about how much and how often are you having carbohydrates, and whether that reflects the same amount of energy you're actually spending throughout the day, whether you're quite active, if you're being a bit more active, you're doing resistance training, or you're being smart enough to redistribute your carbohydrates evenly throughout the day, is a much better approach than perhaps eating all your carbohydrates at once in one meal.
Yeah, I definitely feel very sleepy after I have a lot of carbs in one meal. If I don't space them out, I have them just all at once, I will fall asleep in the next minute.
Yeah, but actually that's not necessarily anything to do with insulin. It is more that the carbohydrates can be very helpful for the production of serotonin, and serotonin is pretty much a neurotransmitter that gives you that sense of calmness and peacefulness, and you feel actually good. And that actually is kind of related to that sort of drowsiness, that you actually want to sleep and rest. And that is a normal reaction of everyone once you eat carbohydrates, or a combined meal of protein and carbohydrates as well.
Awesome. Another question we just received is, one should be in a deficit for how long for healthy fat loss?
So you mean how much in a deficit? How long?
How long should someone be in a deficit for it to be healthy for fat loss?
So the deficit depends on how much you need to lose, all right? Because it depends on what's your initial weight and what your target weight is. Obviously, the deficit will depend on that, basically. If it's a very, very large amount of weight you need to drop, you will probably need to use your calorie deficit wisely for a long period of time. Obviously, it has to be, probably initially you could to think about being a little bit aggressive, just to kind of get you on the go, get you motivated, see results. But the leaner you get, the wiser you need to be with the calorie deficit and how well you structure that in between some diet breaks and refeeds, so you avoid and prevent any sort of muscle loss or lean body mass loss, and you are pretty much focusing on fat loss as a main focus. But it has to depend, and you really want to go conservative if you're getting closer to single digits, okay? So it really depends on what your initial body weight is and how much you need to lose.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys are enjoying this live, make sure you click the heart down at the bottom to let us know. Yes, we will be saving this live, so you'll be able to watch it on Clean Health Fitness Institute's page. We do have a couple of more questions, so we'll stay around for a little bit longer since you guys are here. Astrid, the next question is, how do you develop a healthier relationship with food?
Okay, that's a great question. Everything comes and starts from your mindset and how you develop that relationship with food from the very beginning. And that is eliminating these extreme thoughts or all or nothing approach, or this black or mindset of, okay, this food is good, this food is bad, and you kind of labeling foods with certain approaches and certain names. Oh, this food is really high in fat and is not good for my health. And like, the more labels you put on them, the harder it is to kind of make your a relationship neutral, where you don't have this feeling that you need to eliminate or take foods out of your diet in the first place, just because you already have a neutral mindset of, well, every food is food, just food, but I'm going to focus on having the things that really make me feel good, that are nutritious, and at the same time, I still allow and I give myself unconditional permission to have foods that I would enjoy, that I would have every now and then. And with that mindset of giving you unconditional permission, you actually have that feeling that you don't need to binge on foods. You don't need to hide them or I'm going to completely eliminate them because they are going to affect me in somehow. So obviously the foods that are bad for you are the ones that you might be allergic to, or the things that actually make you feel really sick, but it's just because you have a particular condition, like people that are diabetic or celiac, with people with celiac disease or IBS, or a particular condition with an allergy. Those foods potentially will become dangerous or labeled bad just because they actually have a terrible impact on how your body responds to it. But otherwise, no food is good or bad.
Yeah, awesome. Next one is, what are your thoughts on detoxes?
Oh, all right, that one. Okay, don't do it. Okay, so you've got a magnificent system that can do detox for you. So you have if you have a healthy liver and you have good kidney function, you shouldn't be relying or needing to use any detox just because your body has been designed to do that on its own. If you have liver problems like a cirrhosis or chronic kidney disease, then probably a detox might be more indicated. I'm not too sure how much the indication would be at that point, but I wouldn't definitely think that that's something I would recommend. Yeah. Now, when people think it, okay.
Sorry. Let's just backtrack a little bit. Exceed Your Potential has asked, how can you say no food is good or bad?
How can I say no food is good or bad? Okay, just don't say it. Just don't think. I know it is easier said than done, but especially if you've come from a place where you already have these labels in your head, you're obviously going to see a donut. It's definitely something that is not going to be healthy, or a hamburger from McDonald's or things like that. But you start slowly from trying to neutralize what you already have as a bad food, trying to kind of neutralize it. All right, if I try to, especially if you enjoy something, if you try to add it to your diet slowly, let's say you start giving you permission to have donuts that you before didn't have that permission just because they were bad, but you kind of allow every now and then, perhaps even if it's a quarter or half of it, with a very limited amount, and you have it mindfully, you taste it, you smell it, you taste the food of it, the taste and the texture of it. You're only giving yourself the permission to have it initially, and because it's not going to be, or no, it's not going, the permission, or when you eat, it's not going to come from a place of restriction, but you actually gave yourself permission. You're going to enjoy it so much that it's going to give you positive feedback. And when you have that positive feedback, you're not going to start feeling like you did something wrong. So it's not going to come with guilt or shame. It actually is going to come from a place of goodness, permission, and self-compassion. And that sensation and that feeling is what is going to allow you to improve your relationship with food and how you respond to it.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess this would come down to the nutritional value that you're getting from your food. So not necessarily it's a bad food, but you could get more from a whole food. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hope that helps exceed your potential in the comments. All right, one more question, guys, is all that we have time for. The last one is, why is it important for coaches to have an understanding of nutrition?
Well, it is super important, just because when you are a coach, especially if you're a physique coach, you know that only exercise is not going to give you results. If you have a poor diet, no matter how much exercise you do, how hard you train, if your diet is really poor, it is very unlikely you're going to recover well, or you're going to have a good performance in the long run. As I said before, you might have, depending on what sport or what exercise you're doing, the diet, depending on that, might not be strategically as important when it comes to quality. But when we think about the majority or the average person who wants to have long-term good health, that wants to have fat loss results or general results that are positive, and you want to know that your nutrition has to be in line with your goals, and you gotta do these two things at the same time. So body recomposition not just comes from exercise alone or diet alone. You gotta have both matched together to have a good outcome if you're looking for this goal. So a coach with the knowledge of nutrition is pretty much something that you need to know to have successful clients' results.
Definitely. So if you guys are interested, you are coaches or you're fitness enthusiasts that are interested in learning more about nutrition, we have a performance nutrition certification level 1 that you can begin now. Get your certification ready for the pre-sale of level 2, which will be out this year as well. And you can be a certified performance nutrition coach. That way you'll get the tools and the knowledge that you need as a coach to help your clients get results effectively, but most importantly, safely. We could go on talking about nutrition, like the comments are going off. We could have a great conversation about nutrition, but unfortunately that's all that we have time for this week. But since you guys enjoyed this live, we will be doing a weekly live at this time on a Monday with Astrid. So if there's any topics that you want us to cover, make sure you comment when we post this live on our feed, or you can even DM us, let us know, and we will get it ready for you next week. So make sure you put that in your calendar. Live every Monday with Astrid and myself. Any last words for everyone, Astrid?
Well, you guys take care. Any questions, please DM us, send us all the questions you guys have, and we will hear for you guys.
Yeah, awesome. Until next time, guys, have a beautiful day, and we'll chat to you soon. Bye.